information out to people because they've asked them to come, and so has Sharon.
Any questions for Gary?
Yes, sir.
The community you talked about, organized to get Chesapeake bid elected. What were the organizing strategies? How they organized to get that elected? What was that process?
His question is, and Gary mentioned, last time, 2 nights ago, a community in Marion County rejected Chesapeake Energy's offer of $7,500 per household as a waiver to let them come in. They got together, they said no, stuck to their guns, and Chesapeake withdrew. So the question is, how did they do that? How did they band together, get together, and strengthen numbers to reject Chesapeake?
When I did all those meetings with neighborhoods, I would always go into these neighborhood meetings, much like I'd have a crowd like this, and I'd say, these are all the bad things about Gastro. I want your eyes to be wide open about what you're going into. They were also being approached by leasing people, and I would tell them how much was going to be looking at and how much you people are going to make. How many people here think you're going to make money or good money off of gas well drilling if you don't have acreage, if you have a residential lot? Absolutely right. There's not a lot of money in it. I did a chart that used to be on that Barnett Shale Educational Commission. They took down that calculator now, but at the time, I used to do many, many meetings. Chesapeake would be on one side and I'd be on the other side. And I actually pulled down a calculator chart and I did a 90-foot by 125-foot residential lot at $8.50 per 1,000 cubic feet selling price of the natural gas. The calculator was set up on 800 wells that were producing in the Barnett Shale. And the answer to the question, at a 25%, no chargeback royalty. In other words, you're not being charged for transportation of gas or the cost of anything. You 25% rate straight royalty. That calculator came back and told us that per well, over the life of a 20-year well, you might make $13,485, or about $25 to $50 per month. Now, to answer to your question, during that time period, the only way you can deal with these people is to organize, because they will lie, they will deceive, they will tell this person one thing, they'll tell this other person another thing, they'll tell all your neighbors sign, you're the only one that didn't sign. And the same thing with these waivers, they were telling everybody else signed a waiver, why didn't you sign a waiver? When it came down to that meeting last night, out of the 28 waivers they needed, they had one. But they were telling all those neighbors, everybody else has signed, everybody else started taking a check. So this is how they practice when they're leasing and when they're trying to get whatever they want to try to push through. The only way to get around them, the only way to find the truth is you got to have people, and it's a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of hard work, but you got to organize your neighborhood, you got to get everybody connected to the truth so everybody knows what's going on, and that's the only way we can deal with it. Yeah, there's all sorts of ways now on Facebook and the internet now. How much? Well,
re-ask the question.
how much produced water comes back from a well? When? Yes. Yes. What they will tell people is, and I heard Chesapeake say this last week at a meeting to the same group, because somebody asked about the truck traffic, how much water, and how are you going to get that out of our neighborhood? If they pump in 5 million gallons, when they first do the flow back, they tend to get about 50 to 60% of that flow back right away when they flow back the well. The rest of that 40 or 30% comes back slowly. And they'll tell you that the truck traffic will last basically from 3 to 6 months. Okay, now I'm going to tell you the truth. I have those 2 wells behind my house now. The last well was drilled 2.5 years ago. There are 2 trucks that come to those 4 tanks on that site every day, 2.5 years later. That water's coming from somewhere. Now they tell us that's naturally forming water. I've got my doubts that if water naturally forming in the ground is still mitigating into that well process, then maybe that's natural forming water, or the gas or the chemicals may also be getting into that natural forming water and escaping someday into our underground water sources.
Well, those two explosions in Rice County were from those tanks they rolled out with the all.
Well, that's the fallacy too. When people say, like Sharon showed in the video, they have that separator that separates the water from the gas and it goes into these storage tanks. The water goes to the bottom, there's some layers of the chemicals or whatever floating on the water, but there is still gas in that water, and there's still a burnable chemicals. That frack water, or that production water will burn. We have seen where trucks that have backed up to one of these things and there was a spark and an ignition and it burnt up the whole truck. That water will burn. Those tanks have gaseous hydrocarbons on the top, that what they're doing right now is they've got a stack on the top of that thing, or a pipe connecting all four of those tanks, and all those vapors go right out into the atmosphere. They're ventilating all those tanks into our air.
What are the setbacks on, what are they trying to do? Like
225, 28 feet to the closest home.
We're going to have to end it there, and Governor Sherrill is going to be, let's pull the question with regard to structure. When you looking for natural gas, how does that impact the new construction in terms of foundation, surrounding homes? He wants to know if it's drilling so close to his home, how does it affect the foundation of his home?
There can be a lot of vibration from it, from the operation too. Also, I'd like to address this gentleman's question. If they truly did take down or drill down only 2,600 feet, they probably are going into a water table or a water well to take that water out to use it for production purposes. The Barnett Shale is 6,000 feet down. So, they're not into a gas well in that location. How they're doing it exactly, I can't answer that, but at 2,600 feet, if that's truly the depth they went to, I think they're stealing water or they're getting water. Now, in the state of Texas, if they're in the county, there's this freedom of first come, first served. And we've had multiple people out in counties that had good well water, plenty supply for a long time. They drilled down, they sucked it out, they put it into a frac pond, a production pond, so that they could use that water for their production. And then they tell the people, well, it wasn't us that stole your water. You're just going to have to drill another well.
We're going to have to stop there. Thank you, Gary. Next, Sherrill Glazer from the Environmental Defense Fund.
All right, well, I don't have. I'm actually underprepared because I don't have a presentation put together for you. But I work with Sharon and Mary Tillman and Gary Hogan and all the other people who are out to the west of us on this issue. And for the last 2 years that I've been working for Environmental Defense Fund, this is the issue that I've been working on the most. And I have to say that I hope that you all have been listening, very intently to their experiences. Because, it's very real. I mean, I'm a person who now lives in Oak Cliff, now lives in Dallas, but I used to live in Tarrant County. And the reason why I moved from Tarrant County was to get away from the drilling and from the very real health effects of the drilling. It can be devastating in some cases. And what I mostly work on for EDF is very technical. So I do air quality measurements. I'm an atmospheric chemist. In 2006, 2006, 2009, we commissioned Dr. Al Armendariz to do an inventory of the emissions coming out of the Barnett Shale. And Sharon talked about that just a little bit. And we didn't know, the reason why we were prompted to do it is because, as you all probably know, Dallas is a non-attainment for ozone. And despite our best efforts, for some reason, we would go into this state implementation plan process. We'd work on this for months and months. We'd get this great plan underway. We know we're going to have clean air finally in Dallas. And for reasons unknown, we could never get underneath the EPA standard for ozone. And we couldn't figure out what it was. Because looking at the cars and trucks and looking at the industry around, there were no reasons why. And so, we just said, well, you know what? There's all this drilling going on around here. Let's just see what the emissions are from that. And it boggled the mind. I have to say, we were not prepared. We did not believe that the emissions from Barnett Shale drilling back then, which is much less than it is now, would equal all the cars and trucks on the roads in Dallas and Fort Worth. So take all that traffic and double the emissions. That's what's coming out of the Barnett Shale drilling. And if you know anything about our history with EPA, for the last 20 years we've been out of attainment for ozone. There are people living in Dallas who have never breathed air deemed clean enough for human consumption. It's one of the reasons why the asthma rate here is 3 times what it is anywhere else in Texas. There are people alive in Dallas right now who have never breathed clean air, ever in their lifetimes. I mean, that's amazing to me. It's sad and it's amazing to me. But there are a lot of, you've heard about all these studies that have been going on, and it's been just one study after another, battle of a million different studies. And but I think the bottom line is the emissions are there and they've been proven time and time again. So it's time for us to decide what it is we want to do about it, because the jury is no longer out on whether it's detrimental. There may be some haggling about how detrimental, but really we don't want to wait until there are 1,400 wells in residential areas before we decide that we want to do something about it. Dallas is in a very unique position on this whole landscape in that we're a large city, so whatever it is that we do will make a big impact. And we have the chance to get ahead of it before, we have wells that are, it's craziness. It's craziness, the things that people experience, the formaldehyde releases, and then the children having nosebleeds. It's all the wells in the area going bad. People losing losing the ability to walk and to feed themselves and to move around. It's not the kind of thing that we can afford to have happen around here. It's not the kind of thing we can afford to have happen anywhere. But if we do not look at our neighbors to the west and learn a lesson from it, shame on us. I really expected for there to be more people in this church tonight. I'm kind of shocked that this is all we have here, because, talk about a quality of life issue. Not only your health, but also your property value, and then what's left afterwards. So let's say you get $7,000 to let someone drill on your land, and then how many thousands of dollars in hospital bills?